Bună ziua și bine ați venit la o nouă emisiune DC Anima. Emisiunea de astăzi este extrem de specială pentru că vom discuta despre un subiect atât de grav din societatea noastră și la nivel mondial, și de aceea am un invitat de talie mondială. Din Statele Unite s-a conectat cu noi pentru această discuție și de aceea discuția va fi în limba engleză. Phil Arkow, președintele organizației The Link, pentru că astăzi vom vorbi despre legătura dintre cruzimea asupra animalelor și cea asupra oamenilor. Și există o organizație pe care o veți descoperi astăzi, care lucrează de 10 de ani, are expertiză în acest domeniu, pentru a intra în profunzimea subiectului și a înțelege care este această legătură, ce este de făcut, ce puteți face voi, care sunt acele stegulețe roșii, semnale de alarmă la care să fim atenți și cum putem combate această violență pentru a avea o societate mai civilizată. Și acum îl invit pe invitatul nostru. Phil, good morning. It's very nice to have you. Thank you for connecting so early in the morning with us to have such an important discussion today.
Thank you. It's very early in the morning here for me. I'm in the eastern part of the United States, but it's a pleasure to talk to you. We're very excited about getting word out about the link in Romania and throughout all of Eastern Europe. It's a great opportunity. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for taking the time, especially so early in the morning. As I mentioned, it's very early at you, but this just comes to explain how important the subject is and how much importance you and your organization to this subject. What I said in the introduction of our talk today was that we are going to talk today about one of the most dangerous risks, and not only risk but dangers of our society, meaning cruelty and violence against animals, and how it links to the one against humans, children, elder people, women, society as a whole. And you call this the link, and we talked throughout our show a lot of times about this connection between the two of them. I also am telling everybody that I am studying the materials that you put forward, that I encourage everyone to come, and we will put in the description of this video the link to the organization, the links, in order for everybody to have access to the very important research that you are putting forward and creating. I would like to ask, what is the link? What is the link as a concept, and what is the organization, the link, that you preside?
The link is actually a very old concept, but in the last few decades it has taken on a lot more significance with a lot of research to back it up. The concept is very simple. I mean, it goes back literally to St. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, saying that little boys who hurt animals become desensitized to violence, and then they grow up and they become aggressive towards people when they grow up. And there's been a long idea in contemporary Western culture that animal abuse can desensitize people to acts of human violence. But it really didn't gain much momentum until about 30 years ago, when we started looking at this in more depth and discovered that it wasn't just children committing acts of animal cruelty that might lead to other acts of violence, but in fact, animal cruelty is very closely connected with domestic violence and with elder abuse as well. And there are now 4 forms of family violence. So when you think of family violence, it's child abuse, it's domestic violence, it's elder abuse, and animal abuse. And the animal abuse is often the first thing that comes to the attention of authorities because it occurs outdoors, and the neighbors will report it more frequently than other types of family violence because they know the dog can't pick up the phone and call for help. And so consequently, if you look at family violence and community violence through this lens of how they're all connected together, how they are linked, we pool the resources of a lot of different organizations together and take a broader approach towards solving family violence and community violence, and recognizing, as we say, when animals are abused, people are at risk, and when people are abused, animals are at risk. They're linked. They are very closely, connected together. And by working together with human services and humane services, with animal protection groups and human protection groups, we can do a much better job by focusing on what we call the link.
I think it's very important that you pointed out these 4 types of violence that we see in families, in households, which of course is a very big danger to our society as a whole, because it starts within the family, then it spills over in the street, road rage, supermarket rage, street violence, and it can escalate in neighborhood violence, etc., and whole countries that can go into chaos with this. I would like to ask you, of course, we cannot make the whole history of the phenomenon, but you were mentioning earlier the 13th century. So there has been it's not a modern concept. It's not something about last year or 10 years or 20 years or even 40 years, which is more or less the age of how long you have been studying with as an organization this phenomenon. How can you maybe take us through a little bit the evolution of this concept? Because animals have been subject to cruelty and to violence throughout human history. Of course, I'm not referring to killing animals to eat, although we can also discuss about how you sacrifice the animals, which makes a huge difference between just eating them and making them suffer before eating them. But how do you see this evolution?
Well, when you think about the history of animal protection movements, starting with the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Great Britain back in the 1800s, and all the other organizations that have come along since, the earliest ideas about why it was important to protect animals was not because animals had rights, but because hurting animals hurt people. That an act of animal cruelty was a bad mark against society. It said something bad about us as the human species, as our civilization. But because animals are considered property under the law, they have never been given the same rights that humans have, and legislators, government officials, human services agencies have just never paid attention to animals because it's only an animal. They just think it's not as important as human needs. The link changes all that, and it shows that by protecting animals, we're also protecting people. And that's a message that government officials understand much better, and consequently we make more progress in creating animal welfare laws by focusing on this aspect of animal cruelty, that it also hurts people. Certainly it hurts animals, no doubt about that. But by focusing on its impact on the human members of the family, and by recognizing that animals are members of our family, again, we make much more progress. And that's how this has all evolved. It evolved initially through the child protection field. In the latter part of the 19th century, the first child abuse cases in the United States and anywhere else in the world for that matter were handled by animal protection agencies. And animal protection agencies had a dual function of protecting both animals and children. And that lasted for about 80 or 90 years until government agencies began taking that over. And then beginning around 1990, we started recognizing that domestic violence victims, who are usually women, would not leave home and seek shelter because they were afraid of leaving their animals behind with their abuser. And the abuser would often target the animals and hurt them or threaten them or kill them as a way to exert control over, his wife or his girlfriend and the children in the household. And so we began to see this link between domestic violence and animal abuse. And then as we moved further along, it evolved into recognizing that senior citizens also have distinct issues when it comes to their animals and their animals' welfare, and that often intersects with what we call elder abuse. Meanwhile, we've also found connections between the school shooters or the mass shooters who have histories of animal violence. Animal sexual abuse is very closely linked with child sexual abuse and child pornography. We have issues with animal hoarders which are linked with other social issues. And so, they all kind of come together in what we call the link.
You shared with me, and I think this relates perfectly with our topic. Some articles. For example, you shared with me a study, a British study that goes from 2009 to 2014, in which different types of pornographies were focus of the police investigations, and out of 405 defendants who had been convicted for possession of extreme pornography, 86%, so almost 9 out of 10 of them, were related to images of bestiality, which means cruelty against animals. And then there was another study of 591 defendants, and here the vast majority was 87%. So in both cases we have almost 9 out of 10 defendants that were linked to animal bestiality. I would link this also to some studies. They are more modern, but for example, when we talk about such links, we refer a lot about the McDonald triad, which is the study from 1967 of McDonald. He was the author of this study, where he identifies 3 elements that would be seen as a predictor of future violent behavior of people, beginning with animal cruelty of children, setting fire, and wetting the bed. Those were the 3 elements of the triad. I know it has been disputed in the academic world, but we see all these elements, the surveys that you've given me, these elements. And then we also see a very strong link between people who were convicted for even serial killers, and they did the profiling of them, and the vast majority, it relates all to 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 of the serial killers did start their activity, violent activity, by inflicting pain to animals. And here I would like to ask you, what is animal cruelty from this perspective? Why? Because I have the argument, I will play a little bit the devil's advocate. Because I see, when I talk to people sometimes about this, they say, oh, but what, if I kill a bee or a mosquito now, this means I will become a serial killer? Or if I eat meat, or if I kill the pork or the chicken, does that mean that I'm on that path? Which of course is a very simplistic way to put it, but there are some people advocating for it. So what do you mean by animal cruelty?
You raised some very interesting issues there. First of all, the McDonald triad that you mentioned was one of the first studies on this. And as we have gotten more and more, we've dug deeper into this, it's become much more complex, and we've discovered many more things and much more sophisticated research. Secondly, not every child who hurts animals is going to grow up to become a serial killer. Okay,
it's important to point that out, of course.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks all serial killers started out hurting animals. That's not true. But many of them did, absolutely. It is a big risk factor, but not all of them did. The other question there is, how do you define animal cruelty? And the answer is, you can't. The law, every country in the world, or every municipality or county or state, whatever the area is, has its own legal definition of what animal cruelty is. And that varies widely. And we've actually identified 10 distinct attitudes that people have towards animals and what they consider to be cruel. I don't have time to go into all 10 in depth, but the point is, a farmer in a rural area of Romania and an animal activist in Bucharest are probably 180 degrees apart in terms of what they consider to be normal behavior or acceptable behavior. There is no uniform definition. It depends on what the government laws decree as the legal definition of animal cruelty. But even within those definitions, there's a lot of room for judgment, and for personal interpretation. So I guess one way to describe it is that if it's something you wouldn't do to your own animal, report it to the appropriate authorities and let them investigate it. Animal cruelty is the kind of thing you can't really define it, but you know it when you see it. And everybody's got their own perspective on it, absolutely. But again, there's just no uniform definition. I'm not familiar at all with Romanian laws, so I can't even begin to comment on what your situation is there in Romania in terms of the legal interpretations. But as we get more and more into recognizing how animal abuse also hurts people, we're also starting to change these animal protection laws and define animal cruelty in more specific areas. For example, we have a number of areas here in the United States where an act of hurting an animal in order to intimidate a wife or a partner in domestic violence is defined not only as animal cruelty, but also as an act of domestic violence. We have animal fighting is now being recognized as a much more serious animal cruelty crime because it's linked with a wide range of crimes against people. Animal sex abuse, bestiality, is now almost completely illegal in the United States. One of our 50 states, it's still legal, but 49 states have made it illegal. They used to be just a common practice that everybody thought was normal to have sex with farm animals. It's now considered, highly legal because it's linked with child pornography and other sex crimes. So that's some examples of how these laws are changing. Again, with every intervention that you have, I have several questions that pop into mind. But the first would be, and it's a very, this is a bit of a change of register, but why did you start doing this research? I mean, you had nothing else better to do with your time. I mean, why? What happened? Because at least I will tell you some of the remarks that I get from people following my content from time to time, where I expose, of course, with a different, with some censorship, of course, of the facts. But some people just tell me, I know it's awful, I condemn it, but I can no longer watch your content because it's so awful and it hurts me. And I shared with you also that it's very hurtful to look at, to acknowledge, to study even, to search for all these images. I'm doing that for my PhD dissertation, which is on animal cruelty in social media. So I have to do that research. So yes, that would be my question. What came over you that you started to do this? Why? Way back in the 1970s, I was a newspaper reporter, and I left the newspaper field and wound up getting a job with a local animal shelter here in the U.S., doing their community education and publicity programs. So I was working in a shelter where we were taking in 60 animals a day, okay? And this was not unusual for, a large-scale animal shelter in a medium-sized city in the U.S. So we were seeing absolutely everything. I mean, we were investigating 1,200 cases of animal cruelty a year and all the other work that we were doing. And as a newspaper reporter, I was desensitized towards violence. I mean, I was, you see it in the course of work, you see things and you just have to treat it objectively. Three things happened to me a few years later, this is now in the 1980s, that got me thinking differently about how we in the animal welfare field were approaching this question of animal cruelty. One was a research study that crossed my desk that looked at one agency in another part of the U.S., a child protection agency, and the animal protection agency in the same county. And they found that in 9% of the cases, they overlapped. Child protection and animal protection were dealing with the same families, but they weren't talking to each other. They were in silos, okay? And I thought, what's wrong with that picture? Because the child protection field came out of animal protection, but now 100 years later, they weren't talking to each other, and there was something wrong with that model. About the same time, I was doing a training for teachers in one of our local school districts, and I had a local veterinarian come in to talk to the teachers about pet care. And I asked the veterinarian a question. I said, every teacher in that classroom was required by law to report suspected child abuse. And everybody in the human medical field is required to report child abuse. And I wondered whether veterinarians had to report child abuse, because veterinarians have the same medical training as pediatricians and other physicians. And if anything, veterinarians have a much more difficult job to do than physicians, because they have to treat multiple species and the patients can't tell them where it hurts. So I asked the veterinarian whether he had to report child abuse, and it turned out he did. He was a required reporter. And then I asked him, I said, do you have to report animal cruelty to us at our shelter? And he said, no, why would I want to do that? I might lose a client. And I thought, what's wrong with that picture? Shouldn't the veterinarian be as proactive in responding to animal abuse as a pediatrician is in responding to child abuse? And then about the same time, I was the speaker at the annual meeting of our local domestic violence shelter. And I was waiting to talk to the group, and I was looking through one of their newsletters, and I saw these 4 drawings on one page of a newsletter that had been drawn by children in the domestic violence shelter. And 3 of the 4 pictures showed animals that had been killed or hurt by daddy or mommy's boyfriend, as a way to warn them that he hurt the animals, he could hurt them if they didn't obey him. And I just remember thinking that this was a whole aspect of animal abuse we just had never really given any thought to. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I discovered we had a handful of other people around the US, and then later on in other countries around the world, that were thinking along similar lines. And then we got together in 2008 and we created this group. It's the National Link Coalition, and our website is nationallinkcoalition.org. And you'll see all the research that we have there. There's just a tremendous amount of information. And we publish a free newsletter that is going out to people all around the world.
I know, I have it, I read it, I research, I base some of my research on it. So yes, I encourage everyone to go and read, check out, ask questions, and then just dive into this page, because it has lots of resources. That's why I thank you also, because it has represented a very good knowledge mine for my research. You were talking about, and I would like to go maybe, because people are watching. Our audience is a very general type of audience. People just maybe they have pets, or they have some sort of affection for pets, for animals. And what would be, because you mentioned, and we circle, and all our discussion circles around this idea of domestic violence that has different types of manifesting itself. I would ask you, how do abusers use pets as weapons in this in domestic violence? And I ask you this because I would like people to be aware of certain signs. So yes, we are maybe potentially talking also to people who are even subject to such violence. How can you identify, let's help them get a better impression or a grasp of what the risks are?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. We've identified a lot of different ways in which the animals are weaponized, the way they're targeted as a way to coerce and control the other members of the family. First are just these threats, threatening to harm or kill the animal if she leaves or if she just tries to establish any kind of independence. He wants to control everything. And domestic violence is all about power and control. And so the animals become soft targets because it's usually the women and the women who take care of the animals, and the women and the children have incredibly strong emotional attachments to the animals. That's a point of weakness that the abuser will exploit, and he'll take advantage of any weak point that he can find. So that's the first way of doing it. Another aspect here is isolation. A common tactic in domestic violence is he forces her to be isolated. He'll take the keys to the car, he'll leave her trapped in the house. She can't go out and socialize with anybody, and the animals get caught up in that too. He won't allow her to go to the veterinarian or to go to the doggy park or to socialize with other people. And you know what happens when people and their dogs in particular get together? Everybody loves to talk and everybody's talking about their animals. He'll keep her from doing that. He'll target the animals through emotional abuse. He'll force her to even have sex with the animals or to watch animal pornography or force her to eat out of the dog food dish just as a way to humiliate her. Another tactic in domestic violence is economic abuse. He won't allow her to spend any money. And so he won't allow her to spend any money on the pet's care, on the pet's welfare, the pet food, the veterinary bills or whatever. And then he'll blame her when the animal gets sick. He'll harm the pets and then tell the children it was her fault and use that to try to drive a wedge between her and the children. And then there's a legal issue here. If this animal is property, who owns it? And if this domestic violence situation goes into a divorce, who is going to get custody of the animals during the divorce proceedings? And we now have a number of states in the U.S. where courts can award custody of the animals based on what the court says is in the animal's best interests. So those are just some of the ways that, domestic violence and animal abuse are linked. And it's probably the most common form of the link that we see.
You mentioned kids and children. Of course, they are part of this link, but also we see some children, and I read that among the research that you have shared on your website. Sometimes and more often than not, children that abuse animals or hurt animals are in fact victims of abuse in their homes, in their households. Why is that the case? And can you maybe explain this signal that if you see a child hurting an animal, more often than not, the child himself is a victim?
Sure. When children are abused, physically or emotionally, they're confused. And they're scared, and they don't know who to trust. And every pillar that they've stood on, for what they understand to be a loving family and a caring society, starts, being eroded from underneath them. And so they don't really know any different. And, children imitate the behaviors that they see their parents do or other grown-ups in their lives. So if they see the adults in their lives abusing, they think it's okay for them to do it themselves. And if they've been abused themselves, they have to fight back. Well, they can't fight back against an adult, okay? But they can fight back against, a creature lower on the totem pole than them, or, less powerful than them. And so they'll take all that negative energy that's been directed at them and redirect it towards the animals. So it can be a very telltale sign that they have been abused themselves. And it's all part of, the complex nature of child abuse, and which, involves certainly a lot more than just the animals, but it's just part of the same pattern.
One of the examples that helped me in the, I go to different high schools and talk to children or even larger audiences depending on the town I'm in. One of the examples that just struck me in the recent years, I don't know if you're familiar, this is a US show, series, it's called Dexter. Okay, so basically Dexter is a very successful series. I mean, one of the top views. It's on Netflix and all the platforms, and it's basically the history of a psychopath that kills bad guys and disposes of the bodies. Okay, I'm not spoiling anything. That's the whole concept. So each episode is okay, there's some perpetrator, he wasn't convicted in court, so Dexter comes like a hero, but he kills them and then he disposes of the body and blah blah blah. Okay, more importantly, and I only realized this watching it again, because it has, I think it's about 10 years old, and now they came up with a new series, is that in his childhood Dexter started, and this is basically the way that his father, who was a policeman, saw that there was a problem with his child Dexter when he started killing animals. And people are not aware of that. And I'm telling them, be aware of that. There are 2 or 3 episodes in which this appeared like a flashback, And people are amazed and they see, yes, it's true. I never thought about linking the two together. So that's something that is really a shock for me. And do you also work with children, or maybe with organizations that help children? Because you can of course talk to an adult. You mentioned women, what to do, what to look about. But talking with children, as you said, it's very difficult. They tend to absorb trauma, but they cannot express it. And then they just project it on animals or other beings because of frustration, but they cannot express. How does one cope with that? How to manage this situation?
Good question. Well, first of all, we say Hollywood here in the U.S., but the entire film industry and the television industry in every country in the world dramatizes certain incidents. Mm-hmm. And it's a very common theme that we see over and over again in TV shows and movies, that, people who are serial killers started out by killing animals. And like I said before, I just can't emphasize this enough. That's not always the case. That's a big oversimplification. Okay, it works great on a TV theme. Okay, but reality is a lot more complex.
But you agree, just to emphasize on that, this is also a very big challenge, because people are looking at this by the millions, of tens of millions, of hundreds of millions. And this is I will ask you afterwards about this. I will just to also talk about the media industry and the film industry and the social media. But please continue with this before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the problem. I mean, because so many millions of people see this in popular media, okay, they come to believe it. But, the research makes it much more complex. Anyway, when children, there are some psychologists who have developed assessments and interventions and treatments for children who have abused animals. We haven't really been able to tell how effective those programs are, but there's an awful lot of work that is being done to treat children or either who have abused animals or who are at risk of harming animals. Some of the more interesting programs, for example, we have a number of animal shelters here in the U.S. where animals that have behavior problems and are going to be put to sleep because of behavior problems, okay, they take boys and girls who also have behavior problems, and they train the children in how to train the dogs, okay, using positive reinforcement techniques, by using rewarding good behavior, and they wind up saving the animals' lives by, it might be an 8-week or a 10-week program, or 12-week, I think, in some cases. And so the children, are learning that violence is not the best way to solve problems, that positive reinforcement by rewarding good behavior is a much more effective technique. And they're seeing success, by saving an animal's life, and they're developing empathy for animals. And you and I were talking about a phrase, I love it, it's called empathy is the new currency. I hope I'm not, preempting something you're going to
No,
do.
but it's a concept I believe in, so yes.
Yeah. But if we can teach children in particular to empathize, to recognize that animals have feelings, that we have to protect them because it makes them a better person, okay, as well as protecting the animals, we can prevent an awful lot of animal cruelty.
And now let's go to, take the bull by its horns, just to use an expression, a violent animal expression, because this is a whole study that we should do. I mean, I researched, at least in Romanian culture, it's fascinating, but from a very bad point of view, to see, but this relates to all cultures, just to see the expressions and the jokes and the sayings, and you can get a lot from just that, from it's raining cats and dogs to we have an expression to cut the cat in two, chase two rabbits, etc., etc. But that's that's emphasizes. But now let's. You mentioned the media, and I would differentiate this into traditional media and social media. We see a lot of movies in which horses, animals, back in the days, I mean 90s, 80s, 70s, were literally killed on TV sets for, just to film. This has changed a little bit. How impactful do you think that shows, movies are in this regard to normalizing cruelty against animals, or rather fighting against it?
I'll tell you exactly how that started. It was in 1939.
Right.
There was a movie, American movie, it was called Jesse James. And there was this scene in which somebody rode a horse over a cliff. And of course, the horse died. And of course, the animal protection community was horrified by all this. And the largest American animal welfare group at the time was the American Humane Association. Launched a campaign, and they opened up an office in Hollywood to monitor the use of animals in movie productions. And they're still there. They're still doing it. And that has had a result in that the film industry has, at least with films that are shot in America, or filmed in America, have somebody on set, and they work with American Humane whenever there are animals involved anywhere in the script, to make sure that the animals are treated kindly, that they're treated humanely. Now, of course, if movies are filmed overseas and in other countries, or film production companies in other countries, I don't believe that those protections are in place. That has had an overall effect of at least reducing the amount of actual cruelty that occurs in the movie. But there may be acts of cruelty that are simulated, that are computer generated, that are suggested without necessarily harming the animal, as a way to advance the plot, as a way to get, the meme going, as a way to get the idea across. Like I said, just, it's an effective technique to demonstrate, somebody's cruelty by showing them being cruel to animals. And fortunately, in many cases, it's not really happening on screen, at least with American movies and television productions. But I can't really say, in all honesty, whether that's the case for movies that are filmed in Romania or any other country.
I think that, we are all talking about AI and all this generative video industry that is killing jobs, and we are very afraid as a species about this, although we created it and we are using it. But I think that exactly the point that you make, may be one of the best use cases for this AI generative videos, because you no longer have to cross the sea to film a lion, but you can just generate it and, as you said very well, obtain the effect of that in your, and I think people will accept it. So I think that's a good thing. And now moving to the other product creators, which are not big Hollywood producers with millions of euros of budgets and gear and equipment and all that and media sets, but are the people like you and me having just this device in my hand, a phone. Basically, everybody that has a phone is a content creator, as we call them now. Some of them, of course, just take selfies and put them online, which is very nice, or even a nice photo or video of the cat. But some of them, and it's very funny how you use terminology, some of them create content which portrays violence against animals, and which is now, when we are talking, when we are recording the show, still, even on the same platform that our discussion will be aired, on the same platform you can find lots of contents, hours and hours and hours, with tens of millions. I'm sorry to inform you, Phil, we will not have the same views as those videos, unfortunately. Of course, I'm relating to social media. How do you see this phenomenon in social media? Because at least from my study in the past 4 years, it's extremely dangerous, and it's it's a booming industry.
It's dangerous and it's unregulated.
Yes.
And I don't know how we stop it. And of course, we're concerned about animal cruelty, on social media. There are lots of other issues that other groups are concerned about, and that's that are being depicted on social media as well. There are efforts to try to regulate it, to try to get Facebook or Meta or X or whatever, these are Instagram, to try to regulate the content, but it's an almost impossible task, again, because so much of it comes from other countries. There are no real agencies out there that can enforce it, and there's just too much content being generated for anybody to really investigate all the cases and look at. I don't know how we're going to solve it. I honestly don't, but I think it's very dangerous. And as you say, everybody can become their own content creator. Everybody can become, create something, and suddenly, they are an influencer, and suddenly everybody believes them because I saw it on my phone, I saw it on my computer. And, stupid ideas get spread very quickly. Conspiracy theories get spread very quickly, and ideas about animal cruelty can be spread very quickly. It's pretty dangerous. And for those of us, who grew up before the social media revolution, we don't understand the younger generation where that's all they know. I was on a plane a few years ago, and the only time I have to actually read is when I get on a plane. And now I have a couple of hours, with nothing to do, so I pull out a book and I do some reading, just reading for fun. And these two young people were sitting next to me, and they looked over, I'm not making this up, and one of them said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a book." And he said, "Do you read it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "The whole thing?" I said, "Yeah." He was completely clueless, okay? Anything longer than a tweet is something he couldn't comprehend, okay? It's a frightening thing for those of us who, I started out as a newspaper reporter. I work in print. Yeah. I work in reading, okay? I want people to read, because when you read, it engages different parts of the brain as opposed to just seeing something visually. And it gets people thinking, and it makes people connect new ideas. We have a whole generation that just doesn't understand that.
I think that's the reason why we are having this discussion between you and me across the ocean via social media, and it will be on social media, it will not be on regular television, because we will have bigger audience and bigger views, and we are trying to fight fire with fire, fight social media on social media. You cannot fight it elsewhere, and I do believe that it's a fight going on, and spreading non-scandalous, non-sexual, non-blood type related content which generates less engagement is a challenge, but we are certainly trying to address it. So just to ask you, what do you think that social media is not ready to hear from this perspective?
Well, I don't think they're ready to hear about regulation. We have become a society, and I say that, thinking about multiple countries. It's not just the U.S., but, we see multiple countries around the world where authoritarian leaders are taking over, and the public just doesn't trust government. And it goes so far as to, movement for people called sovereign individuals. They think they are their own country and they can make their own rules and they don't have to obey any national laws at all. And so now they have the power of generating content, and they are, largely able to create whatever they want. And the more likes they get, the more clicks they get, the more, support they get from, people watching it, or they can say, wow, this got, retransmitted so many millions of times. That just, inspires them to keep doing it over and over and over again. And, social media has lots of good things going for it. It can be a fantastic way for people in a community to know what's going on, to get information out immediately. If there's a natural disaster, or to let people know what the traffic conditions are, or to get information like this out to large audiences. But it can also do considerable amount of harm if misinformation and disinformation gets out, which of course has been a real problem. I think it also needs to be said that every new form of communication that the human species has ever developed has had issues with people fearing it's the end of the world. When the telephone came around, when the telegraph came around, when the printed word came around, when computers first appeared, everybody thought, oh, this is the end of civilization as we know it. I would like to think that we will be able to survive the social media and the AI revolutions. Right now, I'm just not sure how we're going to do that.
There is a big challenge, and I totally agree. My PhD is in communication, so that's why I'm studying social media and animal cruelty. I'm trying to mix the two together. The main challenge, as I said, that there is a big opportunity for artificial intelligence to help lower the need to actual film animals in different scenarios. There's a big difference, at least from my point of view, between all the means of mass communication that you were referring to, printing press, television, newspaper, etc., because these were all means of replicating a message. So you had one generator and it was replicating to mass audiences. The problem with artificial intelligence in this scenario is that it's generating the content. It's not only replicating it. So a model of artificial intelligence will not only replicate what you are saying, but it will twist it and give it another meaning, or maybe 1,000 meanings on different channels. And it can go very good, but it can also go very bad, because I'm feeling that people are losing the control of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just thinking about it, Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press, and he made everybody a reader.
Yeah.
And then the typewriter was invented, and that made everybody a writer. Everybody could suddenly write, something. And then the Xerox machine came along, and suddenly everybody could be a publisher. They could mass produce, they could replicate lots of information. Okay? And now social media, this little thing in our pocket here, has made everybody. And there's my former dog. Hello there.
Yeah, I can do the same with my actual dog now. Yeah, we can share. This is how people greet in our domain. Show me your phone.
Yeah. that has made everybody a content creator. Okay, but now artificial intelligence has basically taken all that away.
Yeah.
And the computers have taken over. And of course, science fiction writers have been talking about that forever. You know, do androids dream of electric sheep? An Isaac Asimov novel from many years ago.
One of the things you pointed out, which is a grave danger to humanity in general, and social media amplifies it, and artificial intelligence might even generate it. But let's come back to social media and what we are generating. Was the misinformation, fake news, false information that is spreaded out. And I would ask you, what are the biggest, because you have lots of experience of more than 30 years in this domain, what are the biggest myths when talking about animal cruelty that you are confronted with?
Well, the first myth, and I mentioned this already, is the myth that, you know, every serial killer started out hurting animals. Mm-hmm. Okay. That is a myth. A lot of them have, but not all of them have done that. Another myth is that all forms of animal cruelty are the same, and that, you know, we just need to stop all of it. Well, the fact is there are many different types of animal cruelty, and they all have to be handled differently. For example, the isolated woman living alone with 60 cats and an animal hoarder has a whole different mindset and a whole different view of the world than a teenage boy who's shooting stray cats in his neighborhood. Okay, you know, do you prosecute them or do you try to have a psychological intervention? And I don't have an easy answer for that. But the fact is, they're coming at it from two completely different viewpoints. You know, some people eat meat, some people don't eat meat. Some people raise animals for commercial value. Other people have companion animals as pets. And, you know, different views as to what is appropriate behavior and what is inappropriate behavior. Some people hunt, other people are opposed to hunting. I found that, you know, you have to understand the mentality of the person you're working with or dealing with, and recognize that their worldview about animals and their welfare could be completely different from yours. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily cruel. It just means they have a different viewpoint. As I said earlier, we found 10 distinct values that people have about animals and animal welfare. And they're all valid reasons. They're all valid approaches to dealing with the human-animal bond, the human-animal relationships. But we all obviously don't agree, you know, with all of them. But they do. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're cruel. So, I mean, a big myth is just assuming that, you know, your view about animal welfare and animal rights and protecting animals is the only right way to do it. That's a big myth. You have to be more broad-minded and recognize that these other value systems, you know, don't necessarily mean that somebody is inherently cruel to animals.
Because we are reaching the conclusion of our discussion, at least this first conclusion, because there are so many aspects, and I would really like to keep on this discussion ongoing on all media. Because I always like to ask professionals, that's the reason of existence of this show, to bring up professionals and give people tips, tricks, toolkits to the best case that they can use. So you mentioned a few categories of people that are involved in this chain of events. Veterinarians, NGOs, police, parents, victims or potential victims. So I would like just to ask you, what would be your advice for, let's start with veterinarians, because this is a crucial point that you touched upon. You don't have to be obligated, in my point of view, to help you can do it by yourself. Nobody, I don't know of any veterinarian or anybody that went to jail for doing good. But regardless, what would be your advice for veterinarians that I'm certain they are watching us also?
This is a main issue of mine, a serious issue. Right, you remember when you asked me how I got into this, and one of those instances was the veterinarian saying he wouldn't report animal cruelty because he might lose a client.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, we have 50 states in America, and now in 43 of those states, veterinarians are either allowed or required to report suspected animal cruelty. We've changed the laws in those states to be able to make veterinarians first responders, if you will, to suspected animal cruelty. I don't know what the situation is in Romania or other countries in Europe, but we believe the veterinarian is the first line of defense in protecting animal cruelty because they have the training, they have the academic background. We now have several hundred veterinarians trained in veterinary forensics to be able to diagnose, the medical conditions that define animal cruelty under, whatever the laws say, and come up with the clinical evidence, the clinical information. But veterinarians are scared to get into this area because in many cases they're small businessmen and businesswomen. They're trying to pay off their student loans. They haven't had a lot of training in this. They are extremely well trained in dealing with the medical issues of the animal on the table. They are completely clueless about dealing with the psychological issues of the person at the upper end of the leash. So we're training veterinary social workers to work in veterinary hospitals to deal with the human issues that are involved with animal welfare. And we have a whole program that's involved over that. But if we can get more veterinarians to do this, to report suspected abuse to whoever the appropriate authority, that's another problem. Veterinarians think that they have to know because that's their whole training. They have to be able to see a situation, diagnose it, and say, I know this is this kind of condition, and here's how we treat it. Well, they don't have to do that with animal cruelty. They just have to suspect it and then report it and let that agency investigate it further. Meanwhile, they take very detailed notes and compile their information and come up with whatever evidence the investigating agency might need. Unless the law specifically allows them or requires them to do that, it's going to be difficult for the average veterinarian to want to do it. Even though it might be the right thing to do, there are a lot of hurdles that they have to jump over in order to get to that point of doing. That's been our experience here in the U.S., and I suspect it's the same everywhere. Yes, veterinarians go into their amazing work because they love animals, but they don't want it, they're afraid of the legal implications. Talk about social media. One of the big objections that veterinarians have is they're afraid that if they report a client, for possibly being cruel to their animal, they're going to get a bad reputation on social media. And our response to that is, who cares? Is that the kind of a client you really want? And if people start depending on social media reviews as to whether they're going to go to this veterinarian or not, rather than word of mouth and personal referrals and the usual way that people find a professional to provide a service, again, that's just another bad mark against social media. But the point is, veterinarians play a huge role in this, and we would like to see more veterinarians recognize, in a One Health, it's called One Health, or it's called One Welfare in Europe, that animal abuse is linked with, human abuse and environmental concerns. And the veterinarian is a key participant, a key player in that. And the New Zealand Veterinary Association said this back in 2015, that veterinary medicine is a unique profession. It's a three-dimensional profession with a responsibility to protect human health, animal health, and the environmental health. And we think of the veterinarian only as an animal doctor. he's actually the other family doctor, the other family physician, if you will, taking care of the four-legged members of the family. And the veterinary oath in the United States and in the UK and in Canada, I don't know about Romania, but the veterinary oaths and the standards of practice now say that veterinarians have a responsibility to address human health and safety and welfare, as well as the animal safety and welfare. So this is a part of what veterinarians are supposed to do, but they need more training, and they need more convincing, and they need to realize they're not going to lose business. They're not going to be put in danger for doing the right thing.
Moving on to, well, you were referring to reporting this to the authority, at least in Romania. I suppose that in the United States is the same case. We are talking about the police on different levels, local, national. Okay, what do you think about law enforcement? Let's call them that, be it local or national level.
Well, that's another issue. In the United States, we do not have a national anti-cruelty law. Mm-hmm. We have 50 state anti-cruelty laws, and we have a lot of city animal cruelty laws. And these laws are enforced by a lot of different agencies. If you go to our website, nationallinkcoalition.org, you will see we have a directory of 6,500 cities and counties with a list of who to call to report animal cruelty in any particular community. And it's ridiculous, okay? There's not one number to call. There can be as many as 600 different numbers to call in any particular state. So it might be the police, it might be a society for the prevention of cruelty to animals, or a humane society, which means something different in the US than it does in the UK. It could be some other agency, a health agency or whatever. So, we have that issue. Secondly, law enforcement agencies in general do not prioritize animal welfare issues because they think it's only an animal. So we have to train law enforcement to recognize, yes, it is an animal, yes, it's property, but by protecting the animal, you are protecting people, you're protecting public safety. That's a difficult thing for them to understand. It takes a lot of training. And so we have to work with the law enforcement authorities to recognize that these laws are there for a good reason, and that animal cruelty, like anything else, is a crime, okay? It's no different than robbery or rape or burglary or, traffic violations or whatever. They're crimes, they have to be, handled accordingly. Animal cruelty is a crime, and so they have a responsibility to investigate it like any other crime. And again, by recognizing that this act could lead to acts of violence against people, or that people are being harmed at the same time, that will give them more interest in pursuing an investigation. And then above and beyond that, we have the prosecutors and the judges who have to recognize these are serious crimes, and we need to bring these cases to court, and we need to punish the offenders. And if the police get the support from the courts, then the police, again, are going to be more likely to pursue an investigation.
So to sum up, or to finish this whole the different actors, of course, NGOs, I will not mention them because they are the most active in this, and welfare NGOs. I would come to the end user, if you want, the person watching us. And I would have two questions here. One, because some of them are parents, maybe will be parents, what do you think a parent should teach his child about cruelty against animals? What would be the most important thing that a parent should teach his child? 4
words: be kind to animals. Very simple.
That's great.
Very simple.
That's a great.
To recognize that animals have feelings, and children don't like to have their feelings hurt. Mm-hmm. Children don't like to be bullied. Children don't like to be hurt. Well, animals feel the same way. So don't hurt them. Be kind to them.
Okay, and then I will challenge you because that's a concept I think applies very well to adults also, not only to children. But that would be my last question. What would be your advice to the adults watching us? And you cannot use the same 4 words.
6 words.
Right.
If you see something, say something. Okay.
Right.
If you see anything that you suspect might be cruelty to animals, report it to whoever that authority is. And again, I don't know the Romanian system. I mean, this is also assuming that there is a system in place, that there are police or law enforcement agencies or animal police, as I believe you called them, that are there to enforce these laws. And they may not exist throughout the entire country. But find out who that appropriate agency is and report it to them. And they're going to need specific details. Mm-hmm. They're going to need you to, identify yourself. You can't do this anonymously because they may need you to testify in court. They need to know the specific time and date and place and exactly what you saw. They're going to need some evidence. If you can take photographs or make a recording or videos, social media, okay, of what you saw, that can help them with their case. You, again, have to understand the restrictions that they have to work with. The thing that a law enforcement agency hates to hear, or an animal welfare agency or an animal protection agency, they hate to hear somebody calls up and says, the guy next door is always beating his dog. Mm-hmm. They can't do anything with that, okay? They need somebody to say, I specifically saw this happen on this date at this time, and I'm willing to testify about it. Okay, that's something they can do, or that's something they can deal with. So if you see something, report it. And don't be afraid to report, because the animals, like I said, can't pick up the phone and make a report themselves. That's the best thing you can do.
Phil, thank you. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for everything that you have done and that you keep on doing, and extend our thanks to the whole organization, the Link Coalition. All the resources that you pointed out will be in the description of this video. I think it was a very tough but necessary discussion that we had. Because we cannot just look away and say it doesn't exist because I'm not seeing it. But there are people seeing stuff like that, and you and your whole team are such people, and I really appreciate everything that you have been doing and are doing currently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing in Romania to spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Until next time, hope we have not so many cases to talk about, but thank you. Dragilor, aceasta a fost emisiunea noastră, o discuție, așa cum am spus la sfârșit, dură, dificilă, dar cu o realitate pe care nu o putem neglija. Ce este cel mai important de reținut? Când vezi ceva, acționează, raportează, fii specific, pentru că poți salva o viață de animal și poți salva vieți ale oamenilor la care ții și ale societății în general. Raportați, fiți specifici și iubiți animalele, pentru că dacă reușim să facem acest lucru, vom putea avea o societate mai civilizată. Până la următoarea noastră întâlnire, bucurați-vă de animăluțele voastre și nu uitați de ce anima.